Welcome, Felix.
Thank you, Rae. Hello, how are you? Happy Sunday.
God, thanks God you can take over the talking.
I
Got a bit tongue-tied
give you a
there
break.
a bit in the intro. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Feeling good on a beautiful Sunday, so can't complain.
It is stunning, isn't it? Now, what do you think about this Melbourne weather? When is it going to stop?
Well, that's a concern. It's Melbourne, so probably next week it'll be cold again. But no, we're making the most of it. So, what a cracking weekend. Footy finals, out and about. Enjoying the weather, absolutely.
Yeah, no, we are very, very fortunate. And whilst one might say, yes, Melbourne will turn it on as fast as it turned it off, there's a beauty in that as well, isn't there?
Indeed. Yeah, absolutely.
Do need that sprinkle of water to make things grow. So, Felix, what brings you here today? You just sort of wandered into my studio. No.
Just wandered in, just off the street, Rae. Yeah.
Look, our focus today, Felix, as always on this show, is the beautiful and kaleidoscopic spectrum of what is the human condition. And more specifically, God, I can't get a word out today, honestly. I don't know why. My Garmin watch, which I use to manage my own mental health, tells me I had 8 hours and 16 minutes sleep last night, and about 3.5 of that was deep.
That's good.
And about 2.5 was REM. So I should be ahead.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good stats.
Really, really good stats. So why am I stumbling across my words? I don't know. Anyway, let's start by how we met. David Eilenberg.
Yes. Yeah, mutual friend.
You know, David, he was at my very, very first mental health workshop pilot actually it would have been more than 10 years ago.
Wow.
And he sat in that pilot and gave me the most amazing feedback. I'd never written a program before, let alone delivered one around mental health. And as we know, 10 years ago, people weren't really talking much about it in the workplace. So he was at that time, he was the head of HR at L'Oreal here in Australia. Then he left. Didn't hear much about L'Oreal after that. And he went to Spectrum Brands,
That's
home
right.
of the George Foreman Grill. Left there, went to you, and we don't hear about George Foreman anymore either. So
No. Yeah, no. And you know, met Dave over a beer, which is probably the best place to meet a lot of people sometimes. So
what, randomly?
No, so it was through a client of ours who was the CFO. He introduced us to David. David just come out of Spectrum Brands and didn't want to quite retire and wanted to keep doing something interesting. So met over a beer and connected and said, well, why don't you jump on board and give us a hand growing the business? So that was it. That was hiring process completed. No reference checks or anything. Maybe that was the mistake. I don't know.
Right, let's talk about process after the show, shall we? And due diligence. But you mentioned the business, and we probably haven't even introduced your business because you are an HR people entrepreneur, like everything involved in the human condition. You sit on the other side of the fence from me, but do you want to describe your business?
Sure. So, look, we call ourselves not the average consultancy, but we are a consultancy. So we're typically an HR consultancy. A lot of our work is in mergers and acquisitions, change management, but with a really strong bend on building organisational capability. So do a lot of work around team dynamics, team performance, leadership development, as well as just helping businesses unlock problems or solve problems, might be the best way to describe it. So we've been in business since 2018. We've got just over 20 odd consultants working for us across Australia, with a number of household brands as clients. So it's been a roller coaster. It's been busy for the last 5 years, but absolute hoot. Enjoyed every minute of it. So if you could answer this, what is a common business problem that you come across? It's and they're all so unique and different. But if I think about some of the ones we've been tackling at the moment, it's a lot of organisations go through such big periods of change, whether they grow, whether they're struggling. COVID was a really good example of that, where businesses had to adapt and. Some people might find this surprising, but a lot of businesses really struggled with the whole notion of having their staff working from home. Can we trust them? How's it going to work? What's it going to look like? So, helping them put a roadmap in place with their staff, working through those changes. A lot of our clients operate in the private equity space where they're constantly acquiring or growing and trying to often make a shift from a previous owner to a new owner and try and ensure they've got the right mix of people, the right strategies in place. So we'll normally come in and help them try and solve those problems. Yeah.
Has there been a problem you haven't been able to solve?
Plenty. Plenty weird. Yeah, no. And look, I think that's part of it as well, which is knowing our own limitations. And a lot of the time we'll sometimes, get involved in projects where things will come up where it's just completely out of our wheelhouse. And so we've had to step away and say, that's not ours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You look at the evolution of consultancies, and I think we started seeing a lot pop up, after sort of when redundancy became a very common word in our language. I remember back being at Black & Decker in the very early 90s. We hadn't really heard the word redundancy, and I was with them at the time, and we were shutting down all of our manufacturing here in Australia, and it was a really new thing, seeing people leaving businesses that have been there for 10, 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50 years in the case of Black & Decker, and this trust kind of really shifted in business around, I have a job, I'm there for life and employ my whole family as well too. Do I really trust that I'm going to be here? And I think people, as evolution does kick up, the people started creating their own safety in terms of business. So that's where the dawn of like consultancies come on. I'm talking a lot here, I know, but I'm getting to my point in that consultancies are a dime a dozen. And what makes yours different?
What makes ours different? Great question, Rae. I think there's two things about it. One, and I really don't like calling ourselves a consultant. I find I struggle with the word, but there's no other word for it.
Isn't there? Do you not have one?
Oh, look, I haven't landed on one that quite fits. But look, we really call ourselves partners to businesses, and because I think that there's two ends of the consultancy spectrum. There's the consultancies out there that have a internal culture driven around hitting billables, hitting hours. You bring in some really smart people, give them these templates, and they go into a business and they look at business as being, you're an FMCG, you're this type of business, and we just go in and fix the problem. We use something called human-centered design or design thinking in our model. And the first step is immersing yourself in that business and getting a really deep understanding of who they are. And I don't think, there's a client we don't have on our books where we don't generally care about either whether it's through the people, the strategies that they're trying to achieve, and we really see that we play an important role in that. So I think what makes us a bit unique is that level of care that we do place in terms of the work that we do. And also we kind of... We don't stick to the script, if you like. So, a lot of consultants use the word scope creep. You've got to be careful of scope creep coming in. And for us, it's all about, look, we're there to help deliver an outcome. And if that outcome pivots or changes or we need to adapt and help them, we'll absolutely support them. So, I'm pretty informal in nature and we treat it that way with our clients. So, finding a place where we almost feel like part of their business, I think that what makes us pretty unique. Yeah.
You mentioned design thinking.
Yeah.
And, it comes up a little bit, and I'm not sure if people understand what that means. I mean, human-centered design is something, but design thinking is something else. Can you describe what it means in your business?
Yeah, so look, human-centered design, it's in the name kind of, but you put people at the center of it, right? And you really start to think and understand what are their needs, what are their motives, what drives them. How does an organisation with some of its biggest investment, which is always going to be, usually it's people, ensure that it is providing the best outcomes for them, but at the same time getting the best performance. So it puts people at the centre of the problem and the thinking and trying to develop strategies around how to solve that. And then really what a design thinking process then does is say, well, let's make sure we define the problem really, really well, because we've now got all these data points. And then let's design a solution really specific to you, but kind of iterate it as we go through. So design thinking is a model for us. It allows us to really immerse ourselves in the business, put people at the center of that thought process or that problem solving, thinking how they unlock or develop strategies that are people centered, and then work with businesses to design and engage those solutions. And that's why, part of that work for us is we don't really have an end date for a lot of our projects. They seem just to keep rolling and happening, because as you keep iterating those problems and keep working with an organisation, you find new ways to add additional value or help them support them deliver better results.
I think a better word for problems in these instances is opportunities, really,
for sure.
Isn't it? Because there's always going to be problems. And I even remember, back in primary school when you talk about maths problems, I don't think there was that idea that the maths problem was actually something that was hard or difficult. It was just something to be worked out. And I think, business problems are very much the same. Again, I love evolution. It's something that I don't think we talk about often enough, especially in a world where we're always rapping on about, oh, the world will never be the same, everything's changing. It's like, no shit, really? Like, yeah, we're no longer living in caves, we're not riding horses to work. That's evolution. So as, you know, we're always evolving. Technology is one of those things that we complain so much about, but it's part of what humans have created to evolve. Is that something that sort of comes up to you in business, is technology and the impacts of it?
Yeah, 100%. But I think more broadly what you're saying is, you know, business is evolving every day, right? In terms of the types of businesses we have, the types of workplaces, the types of jobs we have. And I actually think we've seen some of the biggest shifts in workplaces in the last few years. And some of it is technology driven. I think, you know, there's some research out there that says that, you know, COVID and in fact, really the lockdown and the process of this remote work actually advanced some things, you know, a number of years that would have taken a lot longer because it forced us to have to operate in a different way. You're seeing things like people maximising uses of technology for collaboration. You're seeing people more work flexibly, proven that they can work remotely from many different places now. And, you know, part of that you're seeing is driving now the momentum of the 4-day working week. So,
yes. Yeah.
So it's absolutely shifting and shaping. And look, so we see it everywhere. We see it in terms of how... we see it in terms of how businesses are shifting the types of roles around different technologies. And then we're also seeing how businesses are adapting different technologies in terms of their own types of work through some of those things like collaboration.
Yeah. It's interesting and it's fascinating to watch. But I think from my perspective as well, and I had this experience the other day, I was presenting at a organisation, Gates Corporation. They manufacture like really awesome stuff in specific fluid and power drive transmission solutions, but have been around for more than about 111 years or something. And when I went to reception to come in, I was the guest speaker for the day. The person who greeted me, who's the head of HR, and I won't say her name because I'm not sure if she's comfortable and she may be listening in, but she greeted me in a way, she said, "Would you like to know more about our company?" And my mind went, well, I've done my research, so I know about your company. And then she took me through showing me the little rubber belts and saying, yeah, we can fit these onto sewing machines or onto bikes. And I thought, wow, you really are so proud of your organisation. And that really set me up for the presentation, thinking I'm working with a company who really not only cares about its people, but cares about what it does as well. So there was no technology around that. That was just a basic kindness and care. And in fact, that filtered through to the rest of my experience with this organisation. Manufacturing, heavy industry staff, but the way that they cared about me, their organisation, was just, more like it. So
that's a great story.
Yeah, I do love a story, but I do love an experience as well that leaves me thinking, no, we need to talk more about the basic stuff in life as we move into this more complex life. Yeah. So, anyway, going back to how we met.
Yes. David Eilenberg.
We
so
really
introduction.
Went off. We did go off track there, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. No, so we that's right. So David introduced us, put us in touch, and suggested we should catch up, find a place to meet.
And this is how it goes. Oh, you got to meet this Felix bloke. He's the real deal, Ray. You know, no, he's great. You really love him.
I think you said the same about you. Yeah. No, that's right. So then we had a catch up. At beautiful Burwood McDonald's, Ray, if you remember that well.
I do. It was my choice of venue, actually, which David will never allow me to forget, how I really wowed this guy that he really admires by inviting him to the local McDonald's. I mean, what you didn't know is, you know, we described the analogy of feeling like a cheese pull apart a lot of the time. Yeah. At that day, I was getting across children, I was getting across clients. So I had somebody on suicide watch. You know, I had all this stuff going, and that was the most convenient. And that was fine by me, but it was very funny because I spoke to David and he said, "You're meeting Ray where? Don't you know that his son's a sous chef at Attica and you're going to bloody McDonald's?" And he might have told you that already, but I do love my food, and I know that after seeing you there as well. But no, that was a very funny introduction. But we had a lovely glass of iced water. I think it was in the Burwood McDonald's. It was plastic. It was paper or plastic, whatever it is these days. So there you go. Yeah. But we did later bump into each other at
Attica one night. That's right.
Yeah, which was quite miraculous, and it was very nice to be seen at a place like that as well.
Yeah. Well, from McDonald's to Attica, you can't operate on two different ends of the spectrum, really. So
I'm actually catching up with George after this for lunch.
We'll
probably go to McDonald's for lunch. He's come off Attica last night, and we'll probably go to McDonald's. But that was it was great to be connected with you. But you talked a lot about the Reiss Motivation Profile, and when we're talking about consultancies and what's your point of difference, this isn't necessarily part of your consultancy or your collaboration, but this Reiss Motivation Profile sets you apart.
Yeah, it does, and it's come a big part of that. And if we go back to putting people at the centre of our thinking, there's a pretty good belief in our line of work that nearly every problem can be solved by having the right people in the room. And as we do a lot of work in transformation, change, and all these big projects, the one thing that is a common factor of either it being more difficult, more frustrating, or not working or failing is the level of capability that exists. And some of that is technical capability, but more so it's leadership capability and the impact leaders have in businesses. It hasn't changed for a number of years, and potentially more than a decade, but the number one reason people mostly leave businesses is their direct line manager. The person that has the biggest percentage of impact on a person's psychological safety is the relationship with their line manager, that connection, empathy and trust. So if you're wanting people to make a change, if you're wanting people to follow you almost or be led, you have to have that mindset and that belief. So we knew that was a really big part of what we needed in our toolkit. So we set up the business in 2018 and did some research and wanted a point of difference, and we're researching away and we're looking away. And I was actually reading a book called Agile People, which, it had the word agile in it. It sounded modern. So I read it, but it was actually a really good book by this woman called Pia from some Nordic country who wrote about Professor Reiss in her book and talked about it in terms of a modern approach to workplace and leadership. And I thought this is actually pretty interesting stuff, and it's got some whole of self stuff in here. It asks you about eating, about family, and really asks you to bring your whole self to the conversation. So I thought, this is pretty cool. So let's see what we can do with this. And so feverishly got online and started to research about Professor Reiss and ended up at IDS Publishing, which was the owner. And I think it was like 4 or 5 weeks of emailing this number to then have Maggie Reiss reply and say, Stephen's wife, and say, sorry, I was on vacation in Florida, but look, you got to go talk to Clem and Sharon, who are some trainers in Singapore. So it's all right, no worries, we'll go down there and have a chat to Clem and Sharon. So Natalie and I went over to Singapore.
Natalie, your wife.
Natalie, my wife, to get certified. And we brought the tool back to Australia, and it's been phenomenal. It's been really cool. So
what was your experience?
Sorry, I'm throwing things around.
What did you throw then?
That was a lid off my water bottle, Ray.
At least it wasn't your whole water bottle.
No, exactly.
Felix is a bit of a mover, so if you can hear stuff like coming in on the mic, he does not stop.
I don't stop moving
at all.
I generally don't.
No. So are you comfortable?
I'm good. I'm good.
So when you and Natalie were certified, were you wowed immediately by what?
Look, it took a little while. So it's like at the beginning, it can feel like quite complex and overwhelming. I mean, you go through and do your own profile and learn about your motives and needs, and there was a lot of things just even doing that I connected with, and so it has a big impact personally. So you can go, I can see the benefit of this tool.
Did things come out that you go, nah, that's not me?
There were some things that I probably didn't realize were as strong, and there were some other things that I knew, but I hadn't connected enough dots. So I could see I'm fiercely independent as well as a mover. I'm very high in physical activity, but I'm fiercely independent. And there's some things about that profile that I can see the rebellion and I'm also low on this thing called honor. So very comfortable breaking rules and challenging the status quo and finding new ways to do things. Not immoral, just low on honor. We can cover that later. But
you just phone the police. That come
yeah. But there's some things in there that even in my profile really connected to potentially the rebellious nature I had, both from a school but also a business sense. Like I struggle to stay in my swim lane or be told not to do something if I think that there's a better way to do it and challenge that. So there were some some things that just by doing that, I was able to connect to why I was feeling frustrated in certain workplace environments, or why certain teachers, weren't getting the best out of me in certain environments. So, yeah, it was quite reflective and groundbreaking from that way. And that's when I knew this is unique. This is something quite special. But it was when we came back and we started to apply it in business and started to see the result and started seeing people talk about the tool. Been trained in other tools as well. This was one where I went, this is actually making a bit of a difference and an impact. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Did you adapt any of your behaviour based on what you learned about yourself, or did Natalie?
You'd have to ask Natalie probably that one. But definitely me. I think I think there's two ways you look at it. Like when you start to understand these things called intrinsic motives and what drives you as a human being, you either you increase your level of awareness around it, that you make decisions that really play to those needs and motives, which is going to make you feel more satisfied. So there are certain things where it can give you a bit more conviction to say, this is really important to me, I need to do this. And there's definitely some things like that came up. And there are other things where it increases your level of awareness about what frustrates you, so you can moderate that. So a good example, we've talked about family before. One of these desires is a low need for family, which I have a low need for family, but Natalie found that out 8 weeks pregnant with Poppy while we were being certified. But it doesn't mean that, you're not a loving father and you don't have time dedication. It just means there are other things you need in your life, right, beyond family. And, that was actually, couldn't be a better time to have that conversation. Because then as we went through becoming a dad and Natalie becoming a mum and having our first daughter, it forced you to have to remember, it's not just all about that time. You've got to make some time for you. So it actually allowed us to have a more wholesome conversation about making time for ourselves as well.
Yeah. And I think some of these questions that are posed us in such, if you get a questionnaire to get to these results, is that we look at them so literally as well, and we don't want to be seen as a person who doesn't value family, for example, because that makes us a narcissist, or whereas I would be the same as you, like, I love my family more than anything, but I've got so many other things that I do at the same time. And I've raised my kids like that as well. So even though I know how much they love me, I'm not the only focus in their life either. Yeah. And I think it's a really healthy kind of...
Oh, and look, I think that's the hard thing, because society will say, well, do you have a low need for family? Does that make you a bad person? There's these the judgments or tags that get tied to it. But, understanding who you are and being able to act with conviction based on your motives and your needs and being really honest about that is actually really hard for some people. And in a business sense, it's even harder. Everyone wears a mask to some extent at work and hides a part of themselves. But if that's a really important part of themselves that they're hiding, then they're actually going against their human nature and what they need. And therefore, there's only a matter of so much time you can do that before it actually becomes quite a negative thing for you and can cause stress and other mental related issues, I'm sure.
And potentially a problem in workplace as well, where people aren't demonstrating the behaviours and values that are intrinsic to them outside of that.
That's right.
But we're going to go to a break shortly, but during my research, I was pretty fascinated with the story of Stephen Reiss. As we mentioned, he's an American psychologist who was quite the original thinker, like you, and came up with the concept of the Reiss motivation theory when he was hospitalised during the 90s. And as he was being treated in the hospital, he was able to observe the devotion and hard work of the nurses who took care of him. And as he saw how the nurses loved their work, he began to ask himself questions about what gives happiness to a person. Like, how cool is that? Love that.
Yeah. No, it's a phenomenal story. So Professor Reiss, a licensed psychologist and incredibly smart and successful academic in his own right, and did a lot of work in learning and adaptive behaviours in children before that. But here was this life event that made him sit up and go, well, hold on, what drives people? What makes them tick?
Or lay down in his case.
That's right. Or laying down. But why are these people coming into to hospital every day with a smile on their face looking after me? What motivates them? And that was his drive, and that started the largest empirical study to this day in what motivates and drives people. So phenomenal work. Yeah.
And he came up with 16
basic desires.
I love 16 basic desires. That's a lot, 16.
Yeah.
But do you know them off the top of your head?
I do, but don't ask me to quote them because I'm sure I'll forget one. But no, look, so why 16? People often say why 16. Look, what his research had proven is that there are these 16 desires we have that are unique to us as human beings, as a human species, but they individually drive us to an action or a goal or to achieving a goal. So across these 16 desires, we have a different level of need that we place on these motives, or what we can call them needs, motives, or desires. The words are used interchangeably. But we use these motives or needs to make ourselves feel satisfied, to feel whole in some way, Yes. So understanding what those 16 drivers are really important, and they are, some of them are very. They're the kind of items that you'd imagine to be in one of these scales. Things like acceptance, how much people need validation and encouragement. Things like honour and idealism, which more focus on issues of integrity and morality and social justice versus pragmatism, realism. But then what's really interesting, because it is a whole of self tool and a whole of life tool, it throws in things like family, like eating, like physical activity.
Yeah, which are part of the, evolution of motivation as well. The basic things, being food and safety and sex.
Yeah.
Well, probably was 3.
Yeah. Well, romance was actually in his original studies. So romance is in the 16 desires for self-discovery, but we don't ask questions about romance at work, Rae. We just don't go there.
You just go hardcore sex.
So we just talk about beauty. Yeah, no, exactly. We talk about beauty, which isn't a direct correlation. But look, and that was one of the things that really attracted us to the tool, was that it is a whole of self tool. It finds out what are your intrinsic motives as a human being, and it forces people to have that real honest whole of self conversation.
Yep. Well, we do come to we've got a little bit over, actually. That
won't be hard today.
Not surprised. I don't like to talk. You don't like to talk. But we are coming to the very first break in this show where I prepare to play our very special guest song request.
Is this for Poppy?
Is this your show, is it?
Oh, sorry. Did I take over then?
You did.
Oh.
As you're texting someone. Yes.
I'm just saying who's on the line.
Yeah, who's on the line.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm going to repeat that. I prepare to play a very special guest song request, and it's based on a list personally selected by you or others.
Sorry.
Prior to the show. It's time where I like to have a little bit of fun and like to severely chastise my guests by providing you with a cryptic clue to help announce your first song. And you have to work out which one it is, right? So there you go. So it could have something to do with the artist song or the album title. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Are you ready? Here's your clue. If temperament were the colour of your football team.
If temperament were the colour of my football team, well, it'd be blue. And temperament, you'd be saying mood.
Yep.
So I think we're going to be Nina Simone and Mood Indigo.
Ding, ding, ding.
Look at that.
Yeah, how great was my...
That was I love that though. That was good.
Look, I love a little segue as well.
Yeah.
That segues also into a very special recognition of the passing of VFL, AFL legend Ron Barassi, who is so well known for his motivation and inspiration on and off the field since the 1960s. He passed away yesterday at the age of 87.
I think that's right, 87.
Yeah, what a grand age, and what an amazing contribution to...
Huge.
Well, the world really. We could say football, but it extends so much further in the way that, his approach has motivated people outside of that space, and his time at Carlton as well. Team.
Yeah, exactly. So diehard Carlton supporter, Rae, as you know. Yes, so
you'd be feeling
very sad to see Ron pass, and I hope that the Baggers can do him some justice next Saturday up in Brisbane.
Yes,
there you go.
Yes, and you're on your phone at the moment trying to get flights.
Well, I was just having a look. I was trying to get, but I think they've gone and the price gap. It's actually the second daughter, Willow's second birthday on Saturday, so. I think I'll be staying here put for that one.
Why is that? Oh, because it's Willow's birthday.
Well, it's Willow's birthday.
Obviously,
and,
yes.
Yep.
Yes. Now, we're going to play this song right now. Can you tell us a bit why
I picked it? Yeah, it's an eclectic mix of songs today. So, look, Nina Simone was... look, she's an artist that I've always loved in terms of her music. But she's got a phenomenal story, of course. So she was trained as a classic pianist, right, back in the day, and actually applied for Juilliard and a couple of other music schools and was denied. Yeah. But as she kept trying to make money to go for these schools, she just started playing, in jazz clubs. As a side hobby to try and get back into classical concerts, and then ended up. Of course, that's how she got really well known. And it was actually one of her first gigs where they said, "You can't just play piano; you have to sing as well." She said, "I want to sing," so she started to sing. So, she was somebody who had a phenomenally tough life, but persevered and wrote some incredible songs. So, yeah, this is off her the 1959. This is off her first album. I can't remember the title of it now. You got it there?
Let's all let it all out.
Yeah, so she released her first album in 1959. This was the first track off it, Mood Indigo, and it's a classic track because you can actually hear a little bit of classic piano in there. You can hear the jazz and then the blues starting to come through. So, no, it is a favourite.
Oh, here we go. This is Nina Simone and what is it, Felix?
Mood Indigo.
You're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC. Don't go away. Oh, welcome back. The time is just, it's about 38 minutes past 10 and you're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC with Rae Bonney and Felix Blackler. He's the founder of many things, including Reiss Motivation Profile here in Australia. One of the first, it is the first online psychometric tool that shows precisely what drives a person and influences their behaviour. Is that correct?
That's right, right.
Well
it's
done.
Good.
Should have been a content writer or something.
I feel like this is a little bit of This Is Your Life, kind of been unpacked with Rae Bonney.
Loved that show.
Yeah.
Roger Clemson version.
Yeah, no leather-bound books though. A little disappointed, but I'll be okay.
Yeah, you're considerably younger than me, so you probably didn't remember the Roger Clemson version of This Is Your Life.
That's before the Mike Munro days.
Yes,
I think. Yeah,
this was 70s.
Yeah,
early 70s. Great show, but I used to imagine that somebody would do that to me. I don't know what I would have ever talked about back then with my experience. But speaking of experience, that's not about me. Where did you grow up?
Where did I grow up? I'm a Melbourne boy. I grew up here in Camberwell, just behind the town hall in Camberwell. Just near the footy oval.
Yep.
We used to go up there. There's some beautiful little onto-car courts, play tennis with my mum. So I grew up in Melbourne. Yep. Then Dad actually became the Dean of Hobart. So Dad's an Anglican priest. So Mum and Dad were both teachers. They were taught at Merton Hall, Melbourne Girls Grammar. And then Dad became the Dean of Hobart. So we trekked down to Tassie in 93 and finished my school. The Dean of Hobart.
What is that? Tell me what that means.
So if you imagine, there's an archbishop which sits above. That's like a national role, and every state will have a bishop of that state, Bishop of Tasmania. The Dean is I guess that next tier down. So Dad was responsible for, if you like, the large Anglican church in Tassie, and being the Dean of Hobart. It's a community centre more than anything. And if people know me well, I'm not that religious.
That was my next question.
No. And I used to joke to a lot of friends. It was always awkward. I'd go to friends' houses when I was a kid and they'd look there at the dinner table going, "Oh, do we need to say grace?" And I'm like, no, it's fine. Dad never brings his work home, so don't worry about it. It's all good. But no, so I'm not a very religious person, but Dad is. But more than that, he is truly probably of the cloth of giving back to people and putting other people first, which is something that's come through in terms of what I value and my upbringing. But yes, he was the Dean of Hobart for just over 10 years, I think it was, right? Yeah. And then the family migrated back to Melbourne. But I enjoyed the cold so much, I went to Mount Buller after that, which is another part of the story.
Sorry, you just skipped. You were a little boy and now you're in Mount Buller.
Yeah, there's about 15 years in there. We kind of just fast forward so we can wind back.
Nothing notable, growing up as a kid. You mentioned, you've got your dad who's this, really prominent person within the church. How did you avoid not being religious?
Well, look, I think that was partly Mum's grounding, but from what I remember, in my youngest days, I love sports, and that's where my love for AFL came from. So playing tennis, playing footy, very, very sports orientated. And then when we moved to Tassie, kept that going, except, Tassie's as much a rugby place as a footy place. And it was over those years that my size grew and I became better at rugby as a result. So no, I think, it was... So what was it like? I mean, school was hard. I mean, it was a big transition going from a co-ed school into an all-boys school in Tassie, which was at that time rife with a lot of bullying. So it was a pretty tough kind of schooling environment. And Dad, he had a real focus on the community and the work he did. I mean, he was 3 years into the role and the Port Arthur massacre happened, and Dad was at the front and centre of that. Wow. From a support perspective. So
was that traumatic for you?
I remember the day really well.
Yeah.
Well, I was playing friends at a tennis at a friend's house in Sandy Bay, beautiful house overlooking the water, and all of a sudden just helicopters flying back and forth. So I remember that well. Obviously nowhere as near as difficult as it was for Dad having to be there and support, some family members through some terrible stuff. But that was Dad. That's what he did. He opened up the church to people of all walks, all generations, and was there to provide support to people in all times of needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does his influence sort of sit in any of the work that you do today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that whole selflessness and compassion piece and wanting to help other people, I think that's absolutely something that comes through. Absolutely.
Yep. But you fashioned it into something a little bit...
Into profit. No. It's so Mum and Dad both academics, right? Yes. So and going into business was a bit of a different lane on the freeway in the Blackler family. But look, I do think there's something that comes from helping other people. And when I think about what this tool does, the Reiss Motivation and what drives and creates so much passion for me is there's something really magical when you sit down with somebody and give them an insight that can help them make a positive change in their life. And it's such a powerful tool. I mean, this was one of the things we talked about before the break when we got trained. It almost scared me, that you were given the ability to go and have this conversation with people, because it can unlock a lot of personal things, in people's lives. So, and there's a great level of responsibility that comes with that, but also there's a great level of reward that comes helping people through that process. And I think that feeling would absolutely come from, similar to I'm sure what Dad feels helping others. Yeah.
But you also mentioned sport being such a big part of your life as well. And we just mentioned the passing of Ron Barassi. Anyone that's grown up in Melbourne knows that AFL is a religion in itself.
Yes.
And an amazing, footy here in Australia is amazing, the way it keeps communities together, families together, builds families, makes families. What was it that sort of motivated you when you were younger? Like, did you have role models or inspiration?
Yeah, it's so funny. I can't tell now. Dad's dad had some time with Carlton. I don't know in what capacity. I'm still trying to unlock that. But,
the Orange Boy, maybe?
But Dad, we were brainwashed into being a Carlton supporter from a very young age. But Mum always played tennis, and she always did a lot of sports and things. So I just loved it, right? And I really enjoyed it. And even when I was in primary school playing footy and things, I loved it. So I don't know what exactly led to that passion and love, but it was a huge part of it. Look, as I've grown older, I was just still playing sports where I can, but love it. At the G last Friday night, there's nothing more magical than that experience. And Carlton hasn't been in a finals for over 10 years, so it was something special.
You mentioned before about your propensity for colouring outside of the lines and, pushing the narrative, and, clearly you don't sit still. How did that go over when you were sort of going through education yourself?
I was an incredibly rebellious student. I would have been an absolute arse to be the student.
Were your parents very disappointed?
No, I wouldn't say disappointed is the right word. Look, there was definitely a few report cards hidden under the bed. But I think you could kind of summarize 9 or 10 years of report cards into about 3 or 4 sentences. I mean this is from grade 2, 3, and 4. It says Felix would be a really good student if he didn't feel the need to entertain everyone else. That was a really common thread. And another one would be if you just focused on the task at hand, right? So you can see this kind of propensity. I struggled with that really structured environment. It didn't suit me, and we were at a all boys Anglican school in Tassie, private school that was too rigid and too structured. sport's fine, but unless there was a topic that really interested me, like I loved French, I loved history, I loved English. My mum's an English lit academic, that's her background, and I love those things. But if there were topics that I didn't enjoy, or the teacher was too, use of discipline as a way of trying to get things, I naturally rebelled against those environments, and I challenged it. So, but that was kind of my schooling. I then wanted to be a chef, Rae. I then loved cooking. So one of my big needs and my big intrinsic motives is the love of eating and food.
Yeah.
So I actually probably to mum's aghast in grade 11 did 3 cooking classes at a girls' school. I started, so I saw school as something a bit different, right? In terms of what that was, and to this day, and I was actually mentioning this to someone else. I had a grade 9 teacher who said I'd never amount to anything. I had a first year uni teacher who said I'm shooting too high. So look, I look back at that and go, just because you don't perfectly fit into that environment is not a reflection on where you're going to be later in life. And that was a really, that's something that's come to me more through understanding what drives and motivates me. And while I would not have been an easy student, there's parts of that rebelliousness and that push and that drive to challenge and do things, which has made me successful where I am today, I'd say for sure.
Well, I just think that there's so many stories and so many versions of what you have just described in people that I think it's time that the education system started having a good look to see how many people it actually serves. I think there are less people who fit into that very tight structure really comfortably than not. So
and look, I think it's happening in some areas, but a reflection that not one type of environment fits everyone, and I think that's what it is. As human beings, we perform better or we adapt better depending on different environments. And unfortunately, in some school settings, as was particularly this school, it was a very strict, regimented way of being in school, and that just didn't fit me. That wasn't my environment. And
I think there's a lot of research, especially boys around that year 9 space. And my son Rory, he's in year 9, 14. If you're listening in, Rory, can you clean your room? No, not really. I think he is listening in, actually. But Rory just got home last weekend from an 8-week program. He lived away from home for 8 weeks in a leadership program.
Yeah, that's great.
Out at Don Valley. For those of you overseas who are listening in, that's in a really beautiful part of Victoria called the Yarra Valley, which is very well known for its wine and food. But 8 weeks away, no contact with his family, real focus on outdoor leadership, team, self, real reflective stuff. And he's come back the same. He's Rory, but
it's incredible though.
Many people questioned his father and I on why would you have him go away for that length of time and not be focusing on the core education program? It's like, why not?
It's a great experience, and I think being afforded those types of opportunities, exactly, helps people understand, well, different elements of themselves. So no, it's a fantastic one.
Really, really good. But again, it's not about me, but as you moved sort of through this period where you've got all these different influences, you've got your dad, your mum, education, sport, Tasmania, Melbourne, then university. Did you always sort of have this gravitation, apart from being a chef, towards working with people?
It's funny. So I've people often wonder about my work ethic, and I have worked since I was about 15. I think my first few jobs, I had some really random jobs, Rae, when I was growing up. I was everything from a deckhand on a ferry in Tassie, taking commuters across the Derwent River at 5:36 in the morning and 5:30 p.m. taking them home. So I did that. I worked at an auction yard, and I collected money through a call centre for the Royal Guide Dogs. I pulled beers in bars. I just loved working, and I think maybe that was something that came from one of those early experiences. Not getting what I wanted out of school as much was getting it out of work. So from the age of 15, I was already doing between 25 and 30 hours of work a week on top of my normal schooling, across 3 or 4 jobs. So I've always loved different elements of work, and that's been a big part of that. And I think even though chefing became one of those things, and working in kitchens and everything from being a kitchen hand to working your way up to be a sous chef, but I loved it, right? And so that kind of what made me want to then learn a bit more about business and get into that commerce and marketing space, and that kind of what got me into HR and where I am today.
Yeah. Your first job out of uni was a riveting one at the Australian Bureau of Statistics.
Yeah, no, cracking job. Cracking job, staring at numbers. No, look, it is funny, but I have to say there's something about those public sector roles and what they do in terms of development. The reason I joined is very different to the reason I left, but actually joining was a bit of a fall-in kind of role. So I was in Tassie. I actually, sitting on the other side of this table, was working at a community radio station.
What was the call?
Edge Radio, 99.3.
99.3.
99.3. You remember it, don't you?
Yeah.
It just comes to you. So no, I started because when I was in uni, I had a breakfast radio show there and ended up being in their marketing role for a bit. And then that wasn't for me, and was looking for other jobs, and applied for the Bureau of Stats, received a letter, didn't respond to the letter, received another letter, got invited in for an interview. I think I claimed I was sick in bed or something and didn't go to the interview. And this is how much I didn't really want the job, Rae.
Motivation.
And then I went, you know what else are you going to do? Give it a go. Just say yes, because I didn't know what to expect. So I went in for the interview and got the job. And led a team of 15 people looking at agricultural census data, the second biggest census in Australia after people. And I loved it because I learnt so much in that time, and I learned about, the development program was great. It was the first time leading people, managing people, and I learned a lot about Australian agricultural data, Rae.
What was the main thing you learned?
From a data point of view,
Yeah.
geez, we have a lot of pigs. We have a lot of pigs. Yeah,
Wow.
it's the second largest census. So and I learned heaps of stuff. So obviously, they collected.
We have a lot of pigs because people eat a lot of pork.
They do. They collect a lot of livestock data. They collected, water usage on cotton farms on the Murray, like some phenomenal stuff.
Yeah.
But occasionally we'd have to. The data would be incomplete. The census would come back and you wouldn't be able to fill it out, or you'd read a number and the OCR, these readers couldn't pick up the number, so you'd have to call someone. So anyway, so it was this person who was reporting this large livestock holding on this farm in New South Wales, and anyway, so I realised we can't find the numbers, so I've got to call up the numbers. And anyway, it was signed by someone called Mrs. Elizabeth Murdoch, so Rupert Murdoch's mother. So she had personally filled out the livestock holdings on her New South Wales farm. I thought, okay, I don't know, maybe there's a connection there. And so sure enough, called the number expecting to get someone else on the farm. But no, Elizabeth Murdoch answered the phone and we had a lovely conversation about her sheep. We got 15 minutes. So yeah, look, there's some funny times like that.
Wow.
But look, it was too slow paced for me, not surprising.
Yes.
I enjoyed it, but it was the public sector. I mean, one of my favourite memories of the public sector was I had this guy who sat 2 desks away from me. He brought 2 apples in every morning, Rae, and he sat these 2 apples on his desk, and he proceeded to bring out this cloth from his drawer and polish these apples. And I swear it probably took 30 minutes out of the morning routine, just getting his apples nice and shiny. Now, that's obviously a personality trait more than anything. But look, you had a bit of time on your hands is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it just reminds me of Utopia.
Yeah, that's right. So look, it was an awesome learning experience, but too slow-paced to me. So, yeah.
So then was that when you leapt up onto the chairlifts at Mount Buller?
Yeah, so no, I went from... that's right. So Kevin Rudd dividend came in, and everyone got the opportunity for 12 months leave without pay. So I thought my girlfriend at the time, let's go skiing. So went up to Mount Buller, but they had an HR role going for them. So again, was just planning to go up there. They had a job.
Do you like skiing?
Never skied in my life.
Oh, right.
No, never skied before. And I just said yes. This comes a common theme, Rae. I just say yes a lot. And then said yes. So I said, I'll apply for the HR job and landed the HR job for Mount Buller or Buller ski lifts, which was a phenomenal experience. Again, another massive step change. A mountain which Buller ski lifts owned by the Grollo family, employs over 1,000 people, and just such a huge process of preparing for a ski season, and then this 3 months of chaos, and then but by the time you're dusting off or closing up everything from one ski season, you're planning for the next, and you had a great time, wonderful experience. So did 2.5-3 years up in Mount Buller, living and working in Mount Buller as well. Yeah.
Well, was that sort of a kind of life that was suitable to your age and?
Yeah. Look, it was hard. Being the HR manager on a ski mountain is a hard job for two reasons. One, you've got to be the responsible one that leaves the pub at the right time. You got to be careful. So, in fact, one of my friends who was the F&B manager up there, we got a really good relationship.
Food and beverage for people that.
Yeah, he was the food and beverage manager for the mountain. But yeah, we'd spend a lot of time together because we couldn't be out till 3 a.m. with everyone else. But no, it was great. It was a phenomenal experience and learned to ski. Great party culture. You met a lot of people, made a lot of friends during that time as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to skip forward a little bit because just in the recognition of time. But you then got into, well, there was a bit of sugar. Then Mondelez
bit
back
of chocolate
in Tasmania.
That's right.
It's a big. I've done a little bit of work with them down there.
Yeah, no. So moved in the FMCG space. So Sugar Australia ended up. A role came up where they couldn't get people to go to Tassie, and having lived there, I said I'm happy to go back there. Beautiful place. So I ended up back looking after the big Cadbury plant down there from an HR perspective, and had a team down there. Did that for a few years before moving on to beer.
Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, loved it. Look, it was multinational company, big opportunity, amazing site, huge legacy. I mean, built in the 1920s and amazing, iconic place in Hobart. So it was great to be a part of.
I guess, it came onto my radar, with demographic down there, some of the social determinants down there around suicide, especially men, and, the kind of people that would participate there at Mondelez.
Yeah, it's an interesting place, right? I mean, it's socioeconomically, it's not as well off as other parts of Australia, and even where the Cadbury plant is in Claremont, sits on an edge of what used to be workers' cottages, but now other stuff there. So a high amount of mental and personal related issues that would pop up in the workplace in that environment, and I actually found that in a lot of the FMCGs I'd worked at. I mean, traditionally I looked after workforces that were largely blue collar, large production based workforces, and who may come from those backgrounds as well as others. But yeah, I mean, having that and the ability to help support people during those as well, that was part of the role. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned your love of food and beverage. Were they considered decisions going from chocolate to beer?
Look, it wasn't the main driver, but it was obviously a side product and a benefit as a result. Moving into
was
beer.
It a temptation during the times you're working at these establishments?
Well, when you're at Cadbury, you can eat as much chocolate as you want. Yeah. So I never had that much of a sweet tooth. Natalie had a major sweet tooth. Yes. She loves a block of chocolate, and but no, you have whatever you wanted. But no, moving into CEB, it was a great opportunity. So my former boss actually from Sugar was there and asked me to come across to support the Abbotsford Brewery and going through some pretty difficult transformation projects there, and so moved into CEB in 2014 and did about 4 years with them, going through various machinations of change. From
such rigorous time for that industry.
It was huge. I mean, they just separated the TWE, the Treasury Wine Estates business, and Foster's sold to the South Africans, SAB Miller, going through big transformation, and then eventually sold to Anheuser-Busch InBev, an American group. So significant portions of change. Yeah. But I had a phenomenal opportunity to go to Vietnam for a period of time with them for 12 months and look after the Southeast Asia business unit. So again,
you took your whole family?
No, just myself. So Natalie and I just got married, and I think we were engaged at the time, engaged. And I'd fly back and forth every 6 weeks just to. Although she came over a few times as well.
Yeah.
So
what challenged you most about that role? Given, again, look, I remember that time in that sector. I was doing work with Treasury Wine Estates at the time. And did that ever sort of really challenge you mentally?
Yeah, look, it did a few different ways. So work has been such a huge part of my life, and getting overly emotionally invested and committed would be something that challenged. I mean, there's a period of change we're going through in the brewery network. Alcohol was in decline. I think we closed 3 or 4 breweries in a 2-year period. And optimizing is like a really bad corporate word for saying we're having to make a lot of people redundant. But we were making a lot of substantive changes, and they were not easy changes. Some of them were really difficult. There was a couple of decisions the business had made that I didn't fully support, but you had to support part of those to a certain extent. So it was challenging.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
What was the most challenging piece?
I'd say it's probably two. I mean, the first one was, Abbotsford has such a long history, right? So, a site that's been there since 1904, that's been unionised and for a period of time, it has very archaic conditions in place. And the previous owners wanted to make some wholesale change, and we had 3 or 4 different levels of change. And there was a couple that were acceptable, and then there was Armageddon. They chose Armageddon. That resulted in a transition of a maintenance contractor. It was the second largest industrial dispute in Australia. So that was a really difficult time because it meant a lot of... the change was for the right reason, because trying to establish some better efficiency and productivity for the business, but it was really hard because it impacted a lot of people, and that was a difficult one. And so there's some reflections on that to say we could have done that differently. Yeah. And I think the second one is, as you went through those different various of change from different businesses which have different cultures, you start to question, well, why am I here? What am I getting out of this? And I think this is one of the things, coming back to Reiss Motivation, that was so powerful. You can admit in some of these high corporate roles leave too much of yourself off the table, because you got to wear a mask because you have to fit a certain set of values or culture, and you accept that. But at some point, it can make it harder to come to the office and do certain things. And I think towards the latter stages, there was certain parts where I don't think the fulfillment and the joy was there as much, and so that was a real challenge, because it was they were giving me lots of opportunity. It was paying really well. I had all these extrinsic things in front of me, but intrinsically it didn't feel right for me. And I was probably not recognising that or acknowledging that enough.
Yeah. It's curious. I was listening to you before when we were talking about, motivation and, family's not one of your big motivators. Who was taking care of you during this time where you're just one human being with so much responsibility, irrespective of all the money and stuff like that? Who was taking care of you?
Well, obviously meeting Natalie was a big part of that, and so she actually was working at Sugar Australia in 2014. We didn't get together until sometime during 2018, the back half of that year. But she's been a huge source of my support network during that period of time, significantly. Other than that, I'd say Ray, it was probably, you can look back and go, work for some people is a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
It is their own form of addiction, and I'd have to say for me, it was probably a combination of both in some ways.
Yeah. So. I've been thinking a lot about cognitive dissonance lately, and for those of you that don't know what that is, it's really kind of our actions that go against our belief or value systems. It's like, I think a really good example for me was recently I was going to the recycle bin, and it wasn't there, and I had something to put in there, and I thought, I'll just chuck it in the rubbish bin, and just went, oh no, I can't do that, I can't do that, but it's not there. So that part of my brain going, well, it's the company's fault for not having a recycle bin, it's not my fault, so therefore I'm just going to chuck it in the rubbish. But then my belief and my value system and sense of sustainability went, no. So that's kind of what it is. Did you, during that time, sort of struggle with that, given that your beliefs and value systems might be being challenged, but the money was so good?
Oh, look, I don't have to. Not really. I think I put a lot of value on those extrinsic motives. I put a lot of value on those things like success, like being successful, being as successful as I could, and financial is part of that. So I think I overemphasized that at the cost of a few other things. But it probably wasn't until some of the work, which even personally done through Reiss Motivation, and then my own reflection as part of that, is trying to make you go back. But what's your purpose? What are the things that you truly value that is actually important to you? Because the one thing about extrinsic motives is they're not sustainable. I mean, you can't just go about doing these things and feel full or great or satisfied. What Professor Reiss's research says is, all motivation or true motivation is really intrinsic. So understanding what those things are is the most important. So I'd have to say it was probably, I was focusing on the wrong things. And that was driving me more than anything.
Can you just briefly describe, because somebody's just asked the question, sent through a text message, what is extrinsic and intrinsic?
Yeah. So, and there's a couple of different ways you can talk about that. So, according to Professor Reiss, intrinsic motivation are it's the set of fundamental beliefs that we all as human beings that actually drives human behaviour. So these are the things that we place great prioritisation on in our lives. Now, we don't prioritise all 16 things. We prioritise the ones that are most important to us, and we identify what's most important to us through our upbringing, through whether it's our environment, through our upbringing from our parents, through what we learned as children. And these intrinsic motivations that we have, we are constantly seeking these things to feel full. We're seeking them to feel satisfied. So motivational or needs-based theory really is about saying we pursue something only for the reason we pursue something is to get that outcome, to get that goal. And once we satisfy that goal, we feel good, right? Our body releases oxytocins, endorphins. And you know what this feels like, Ray? You do the things that you intrinsically love doing. You feel good about yourself. And because we feel good about ourselves, I want to do that again. So the bigger our motives and drives are, and the more intensity we place on these desires, the more we want to do that thing. So that's really important. And because it's something that's inherent and unique to us as human beings, and it's intrinsic in nature, because it's deeply rooted in that belief of who we are as human beings, they are the things that make us feel most satisfied. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum are things called extrinsic motivation, or external factors that can either reward or punish you. Okay, and money being one of those, or disciplinary action from a teacher or something else. And whilst these things can moderate or adapt behaviour or seek it out, they're not sustainable, because we don't want them as human beings. They're not the sources of our deeply rooted goals that we establish as kids. They're things that exist there. So, if you think about motivation operating on a continuum, on the left-hand side, you have intrinsic motivation. These are the things that we find a connection to, we do over and over again, and they form our purpose. And the things on the right that might make us feel good, that might make us respond to something, but they don't become sustainable. They're extrinsic in nature. Yeah.
It's interesting, and thank you for describing that so eloquently. But when it comes to addiction, all of that goes out the window.
Yeah.
But let's not get into that, because that's a whole nother show. Now, we're way out of time, but that's all right, because this is all about you, and we don't have to stick to a script. And thank you, Rory, my son, who I just spoke about before. He continues to listen in. So
g'day, Rory.
Good boy that he is. Next special guest song request. I bet you're excited now what this is going to be about.
I'm looking forward to the clue.
Okay. Here goes the focus. Oh, the clue is the focus of this show.
The focus of this show, what it feels like to be me. Is that's...
Well, think about it a little more simplistically than that. Like, what do we talk about mainly on this show?
So, see, because I've been able to pick the 4 songs, I can use a little bit of deductive reasoning here, Ray, and try and get down. So we've already played "Mood Indicator" by Nina Simone. I'm gonna say this is "Brief Encounter," Human.
Correct.
Yeah, very good.
Again.
Yeah.
Great clue.
Yeah. Now, great clue. Well done. Brief Encounter, Human. So here we go. We're going from 1959 classics into a jazz/blues vocalist Nina Simone to something entirely different, which is a funk group from the 70s called Brief Encounter. And the song called Human. And no other reason that I love this song, and I'll talk about this later. I have a huge propensity for music, and music can absolutely alter your mood, and it can change your thought process and how you feel about certain things. And we'll talk about that a bit later on. But this is one of those songs that it's a feel good song, and it reminds you every day that you're only human, Ray. You're only human.
Or you are, not only.
Yes, you are. You are human. You are.
But somebody described it the other day. We're just spirits running around in these blobby flesh suits. And I thought, that's kind of describes it really well. I loved this when I first heard it. It really, really caught my attention. So you're right, it does ignite those happiness hormones in it. So don't go away, people. When we come back, who knows what we're going to talk about. It'll be something, though. So you're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC. Oh, you're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC, and you're sitting, or you might not be sitting here, but I'm certainly sitting down with Felix Blackler, He's the founder of Reiss Motivation Australia and many other things. We could call you many other things. Really.
A lot of people call me other things, Ray. Yeah,
like
they
what?
do. Oh, some inappropriate for this time of morning. Yeah.
We were just talking about motivation again, and I was describing a story this week where I was on my very, very early morning walk with Vincent, my dog, where I do all of my learning. And I came across a bat, a little girl bat, size of my hand, on her back, crying. And she was clearly injured, and there was something inside of me so motivated that I could not let this bat die. This is a shout out for Wildlife Victoria, by the way. Long story short, this volunteer organisation, within 30 minutes, I'm standing in the middle of this massive park, Ruffy Lake Park. For those, in Don Vale, it's huge. To find somebody in there is near impossible. Within 30 minutes, I had a bat expert standing next to me, caring for this bat. So, it's now sort of changed. I'm not one to give money to charities. I think the doing is more powerful than the giving. But in this instance, if I have any spare money, that's where it's going.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So since launching in 2021, what's the most impactful session you've had with Reiss?
With the Reiss Motivation Profile. Wow. It's been hundreds, right? We've done so much work with it. Look, there's a couple that spring to mind. It's actually one that had nothing to do with the session, where we were working with a couple of C-suite executives going through, just trying to understand why this guy was responding and reacting quite negatively to some peers, and it was resulting in some unhealthy conflict in that workplace. So we were working hard in terms of understanding what was causing those frustrations, because when you understand what motivates you and what drives you, that's great, right? Because you go after those things. But the other side is, do you know what frustrates you? And usually what's frustrating you is because your needs aren't being met somewhere along that journey. And so, we did the profile with this guy, and we went through it, and we started to talk about this guy had this incredibly high need for acceptance. He had a very low need for independence, which means he's very collaborative. He seeks a lot of psychological support from other people, but he was also quick to rise to anger. So he had this very unique profile, and I'm talking to him about it in this work sense and helping trying to connect the dots in terms of his behaviour, and he just stops and he looks at me and he goes, "Oh, it's just hit me." So, this is good. What's hit you? Now I know why my marriage is falling apart. So, oh my God, what do I do here? And anyway, this poor guy was actually going through a divorce at the time with his wife, and couldn't understand what was causing that. But it was actually the attributes of behaviour were happening at work were a direct match to what was happening in his home life. So he went through this epiphany moment in that session, and I had to redirect him to some help, because we aren't therapists, we're not psychologists. So if people have those, we have to redirect them through
to me,
to you, right, for instance.
Yes.
and those type of people. But it was incredibly groundbreaking for him, and even though it was a very sad and upsetting thing, he was able to move through that with some clarity and understanding what had drove those decisions, and I think raising that level of awareness of himself has been hugely powerful. So that's been a really good one.
Well, what a great example, because it makes me think that in the last segment we were talking about your sort of winding up and questioning, your beer trajectory, which then led to you going out on your own. Yeah.
So it was 2018, and
do you remember the moment where you go, "Eff it, I'm"?
Oh, it wasn't, you talked about, this change in generations and people having jobs for life and then redundancies. I mean, there was a period of time there because of the amount of restructuring going on. There's a redundancy every week. You could almost, if you put your hand too high, you can get one. And the business was going through change. In fact, our regional hub was being moved from Melbourne to Shanghai, and I was in one of 3 HRD roles. There was only going to be one left in Melbourne. It was fairly logical that there would, the right thing to do at that point was take a package, and it was actually really hard at the time, because even though I felt something wasn't right in my environment, I love the brand, I love the business.
Well, your identity.
It was great. I love the people I worked with, and because I pour such a big emphasis on work, it was a sense of loss, right, and sense of grieving when it happened, and then trying to actually have the desire to go back into another business, I found really challenging. And
why?
And because I think because or maybe particularly me, you give part of yourself to that organisation in those type of roles. And I did a lot of heavy industrial negotiation work, and they do take a pound of flesh to deliver those type of results. So I found it hard to find a business that I could connect and go back with. And what happens when you go for jobs, people look at your experience and go, oh, you do all this great stuff. I'd love you to come and do it here. But if you want to do something different, it's often hard to make that change. So look, I kind of...
Do you have an appetite for doing something different?
Oh, I think... Yes and no. I think I love what I do, like in terms of challenging businesses. And HR operates on a various spectrum between those who are really strategic, who partner well with the business, who can influence the strategy quite a lot, to those who are a little bit more compliant driven. But I love what I did. I just couldn't find the right business for me. And I think because I was reflecting a lot of that time. So it was actually only just through that work that a guy who actually taught me in change said, hey, I see you've left, and there's this other role coming up.
So he taught you in change?
So he was my change practitioner. So I'm a certified change manager, and he was the teacher in that process. And he reached out and said, I've got this great client. They're disability services. They're going through a major change with the NDIS rollout. They need some senior support. Can you come have a chat to them?
Is that a possibility?
It is.
Oh, right.
Yeah, absolutely. So met Drew Beswick, the CEO there, and I had no knowledge of the NFP sector, let alone the disability sector. And I met a guy called John Rowlands, the head of strategy in Drew, and was blown away with these two gentlemen in terms of their intelligence, their passion, the challenge that they were facing, what they were trying to do. So I called Matt back, and Matt said, they loved you to come work for them. I said, well, I don't know if I want to go work for them yet. He said, well, do you have your own business? I said, well, I can get a business. Is that what you're asking? So it was literally that weekend we set up Xperience overnight. And the first project client was Possibility, who's still a major part of what we do today. So,
wow.
Yeah. And look, so what really drove that is, I think the biggest thing I learned stepping from an in-house role to an out-house role is, firstly, your level of
an outhouse role.
An outhouse role? I don't know, is that the best term? What's the opposite of in-house?
Oh, I don't know. But when I heard outhouse, I went, I've never heard it referred to like
maybe
that.
I'll call it that. Maybe I've just coined a term. Well, maybe you could. It's a bit more glamorous than that.
An internal right into the toilet,
yeah. From an in-house role to consultancy, if you like. What did I really learn? Like just the objectivity you can have in those type of roles, and the client's looking at you because you're there to help them deliver an outcome and to help solve something. So, that was huge. So so that was 2018. That's how it all started.
I think the thing that strikes me, being a business owner myself, I mean, I'm a sole trader, so there's only me, and my overheads are fairly low given that, I'm pretty much on the road all the time. However, you employ an enormous amount of people with and you have so much responsibility. It always astounds me how do you manage that? It feels like a burden to me, but...
Yeah, I have a very high propensity for risk, which is one of my other big motives, right? It comes through this profile, a low need for tranquility, they call it. I am a risk taker.
Low need for tranquility?
Yeah, low need for tranquility. Yeah, so risk taking, enjoy pressure. In fact, I need pressure to perform one of these type of profiles. And so a big part of that for me is... I always need to be trying new things. I can get bored very easily. It probably doesn't surprise you. And therefore, when we had the business and we started, and then Natalie came across and started working as well.
Does she have a similar profile to you?
No, we're different. We've got some common things. I mean, she loves food, and she also has a low need for tranquility, which helps. So I was going
to say, do those sort of marry up?
So there's somewhere where they come together. But look, I think... I always thought that I could have a bigger impact and wanted to... I actually never thought about going from sole trading to owning a business. I just kept saying yes. I kept saying yes. And before you know it, I said yes so many times I needed more staff. That's really, really what happened. But I kept looking at every one of those problems going... I didn't see the risks as being too great not to say yes and give it a go. Employee number 1 came along, Danica, and she was amazing, and we managed that. Then 2, then 3, then 4 and 5, and then you do get to a certain extent where we're not just you carry a massive monthly payroll cost. You got to make sure you got the pipeline for, but you got a responsibility to these people, and they're giving something of themselves into the workplace. You got to give something in return. So
Which is yourself.
That's right, you do.
And whilst you're worrying about, having to build pipeline because that's part of business, it just doesn't fall in your lap. You know, managing all of those inner expectations of yourself to achieve those things, does that ever sort of interfere with that very
about I think the lucky thing about being in your own business is you get to create the business environment that you want to be most successful in. So I've been able to do that. You know, I have an amazing team of people who they work hard, they're driven, they're very passionate about the stuff that they do. We're very informal in nature. We don't take ourselves too seriously, you know, in terms of what we do. So I think I've been able to create that environment where I can perform at my best, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you change? When I say these questions are just coming out of my psychology head, would you change that direction in terms of going out on your own and creating this evolution of you?
I would probably say being made redundant. I was part of the process, but you know, when I took the redundancy, was probably one of the best things that happened, because I stepped into something I had no idea about, Rae. It was such an unknown, you know, and sometimes you got to have a bit of a blind leap of faith, and you got to do those kind of things. So I think I probably didn't appreciate how big that shift was and how exciting it was. But yeah, it did put me on this course of saying yes. Right? Just say yes. Just give something a go. And what's the worst that can happen? Right? What's the worst thing? I often say that to Natalie. What's the worst that can happen? Let's give it a go. So no, I wouldn't change anything about the course. There's absolutely learnings though on the journey. I mean, if I can think about how many mistakes I've made over the period of time in my life. But
I never refer to mistakes. They're always learnings and
that's
opportunities.
Right, and they are exactly that. You know, so there's things that I'd absolutely do differently. But in terms of where I am today, I'm very happy the course we're on. So. Yeah.
How do you manage that whole, let's call it a circus, because the circus, I think, just has so many moving pieces with. Yeah. I love the analogy because there's hardly any people that work at a circus, but you get the feeling that it's a really, really big deal. Given that you do colour outside of the lines and you're fairly unstructured, you know, business isn't all about luck. It has to have structure. It has to have process. How do you manage?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's two parts. Number one, having a very supportive and loving wife is a huge part of that, because it does.
Well, she's also in the business too.
She's also in the business, but has backed off a bit looking after our two young girls, and because, you know, it's a great saying. I was in a podcast that Rob Sitch did with Hamish Blake that said you can have everything in life, just not all at the same time, right? And I love that, and it's very true, right? So. Yes. So Natalie's had to make some sacrifices from her own career and her work point of view with the family, but also doing that to support me being able to grow the business. So look, you know, I think part of that management comes through that relationship and making that work. There's the other bit where we talk about chaos, you talk about moving fast, and you know, we've had phenomenal growth over the last 5 years.
What do you attribute that to?
Look, I think it's drive. I think that there's a huge drive to want the business to be successful, and Reiss is part of that as well. Reiss Motivation. I think there's a personal drive and ambition that kind of pushes me to do that. The other bit is, and we talk about chaos. You can get very easily caught up, in my view, on things that actually have very little impact, that don't worry, and people can overly concerned about process or planning, and I'm the opposite of this, right? So I appreciate there is a perspective out there where people need more of that, but I'm not a risk adverse person, I think being able to move quickly and make quick decisions, and give things a go, you know, and I accept failure as being part of life. And so I think, you know, if you accept that there are things that you're not going to get right the first time, that's okay, because to your point, that's a learning. Yeah. So.
Well, for people that are listening at the moment who might be considering, oh gosh, I would love to be able to do that, but I'm just not brave enough, or, you know, again, that cognitive dissonance that goes, oh no, but what about the economy, you know, inflation, cost of living, it's all going up. How will I pay my mortgage? Yeah. Which would always come to that. I have to have X amount for my mortgage. I cannot picture having to make that amount of money every month. How do you sort of overcome the obvious challenges in economic business?
That
that is beyond your control.
I think the first thing that has to be stated is having a redundancy is a fantastic building block to go do something like that, because pardon, if you fail once or twice in your first couple of months, you've got a bit of a safety net there to help you through from a financial point of view. But look, people should only accept as much risk as they're willing to be able to manage, because the adverse of that is you take on too much stress, and it impacts your health and impacts on everything other part of your life. It impacts your mood, and so I think my counsel to anyone is only do what you feel comfortable doing at a point in time, and manage a level of risk you feel comfortable with. That's the first one. I've got someone else who's recently gone into consultancy who subcontracts back into us, who for years was unhappy working for these major global companies. And I said to her, you just need to take the first step. She said, but I'm the breadwinner, and I need. And I said, there is enough work out there, and you have the competence and skills. You just need to put yourself out there, and the work will come. So I think whilst there is that, only manage the amount of risk you want to manage. Don't be afraid of taking the first step, right? Because you got to crawl before you walk, and you got to walk before you run.
Yeah. No, look, I would always guide people to have a plan A, a plan B, and a C, and a D, and an E, probably. Even if you're employed by an organisation, you need to have all of those plans. And I think COVID was a perfect example of when people didn't have a plan for, if things changed. And COVID literally changed on the head of a pin. So people who, in families who had 2 six-figure jobs, kids in private schools who all of a sudden had no jobs and no plan, that's where things unravel. So, whilst you said you don't have to have this really kind of tight framework of things to work, within, but to have these plans about what happens when, I think is really, really important.
It's huge. There's this big bit of research by this company called Better Up Labs. They're the largest privately funded group of PhD doctorates in positive behavioural psychology, and they do this whole talk where they talk about by the increasing the amount of if you I can't remember the correct term they use it, but they basically say if you do scenario planning of different options, if you prepare more plans and options, so what happens if this doesn't work? What's the alternate? What does this mean? What does this mean? Then by setting it out, you'll more manage to increase your level of resilience, reduce the amount of stress you have, but then make that first step because you've explored all these different options. So I think it's great.
Yeah. Well, you've got a safety net always. Well, sort of something that you can refer to.
Well, you've got five plans that you're happy with. Yeah. Even if it's not 1, 2, or 3, you've got number 5. Yeah.
Do you know what mine is, Felix?
No. Rae, what's yours?
House cleaning.
House cleaning.
Yep. It pays well.
Yeah.
I know I can do it really, really well, and everyone still needs it. It's one
great.
Of those. So I can, if everything else turns to custard, I can clean houses.
It's 2 questions people always ask. Do you have a good house cleaner, and have you got a great babysitter?
That's right.
And they're the things that we most need, and you can never have enough of. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my safety net is always that.
Yeah.
If people stop wanting me,
that's
then
great.
They can want me in a different way.
Yeah, I love it. I don't think you'll ever need to have to worry about that, though. Right?
Thank you, Felix. I look, again, it would not be the worst thing that could happen to me.
Yeah.
And sometimes I do crave, so I say, I'd love just to do data entry for the day,
Yeah. So there's some joy you get, isn't there? Yeah.
Oh, that sense of completion and the things that motivate us. And I think, I've come to that stage of life where I've really worked myself out so much that I know I have these, I call them dopamine drops and oxytocin drops during the day where I will plant them specifically, like getting up early, going for a walk. And one of them, in fact, next month, hopefully on the show, my guest is a guy called Ben, and he has a company called Ben's Bees. Literally lives up the road from me. He's a beekeeper and manufactures this honey, which is amazing. Like I cannot even describe how good it is. Anyway, he has a little honesty box outside his house where you can go and grab a jar of honey and put the money in. I do that, but then I PayPal it when I get home. Anyway, I'm on his Facebook page as well. And the other day, somebody had posted going into the honesty box going, hey, isn't this awesome in our community that people are still being honest, that there's still these really basic community things going on that we respond to. 300 people commented on this.
Oh, wow.
And I was just blown away to think that's 300 people in my community that know about Ben and his bees and his honey. And it's one of the first things in the morning that I have. I have it in my coffee, and it's something that when I wake up, that's my thing.
That's your thing.
That's my thing.
I love that.
The first thing I look forward to. It's my first dopamine drop that I have. And, I plant them all the way along the day.
Little honey drops throughout the day.
Yeah.
I love that.
Things are the next thing
That's
I go
great.
to,
Yeah.
and it might be, the last thing is Chobani Fit vanilla yogurt. Chobani, a great client of mine, and I'm very grateful to do work for them. But yeah, that's the last thing I have in the day that makes me feel special.
Oh, good.
It's really simple shit.
Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's the simple stuff. And, often we can get caught up with a whole lot of other stuff and actually just go back to what is it that makes us feel good?
Oh.
What is that makes us feel satisfied?
But
what
ignites
are the
those
things we need?
natural hormones as well. I think we forget that they're there. They're just waiting to be ignited. Change the sheets on your bed. Bang.
Yeah.
There's a dopamine hit. My latest one, of course, is, people that listening to the show know that I'm now a proud rah-rah. I'm a grandmother. And holding little Evelyn, it's just like, just let me breathe you in,
Yeah.
So she screams into my
Yeah,
ear.
well, it's the same thing. A lot of people talk about stress and anxiety, and mental health has this greater focus. As you know, Ray, thanks to some of the work you do, and it doesn't all start in the head; it happens in the body. And releasing good chemicals and oxytocin and endorphin comes from doing the things that make us feel good.
Yes.
And when we feel frustrated and cortisol starts to raise, then we start to feel that feeling of stress. And I think paying attention to those feelings more than anything can have the biggest impact on your mindset. And I love that. What are your honey drops throughout the day? What are the things that you set yourself up to plan? Because if something doesn't go well, or you're feeling out of sorts, you've got that coming up. I think that's a great idea. I love that.
Yeah. Adopt it, everyone.
Yeah, I will. I'm taking that.
So we're going to go to we're going to have to race through the next special guest song requests, and this one has I love this.
Do you like
cryptic
this
clue.
one?
Love it, love it, love it.
Something different.
Here it goes. People have been riding this iconic entertainment vehicle in Queenscliff, Victoria, Australia, since 1994.
Wow. People have been riding. What did you say? Iconic
vehicle.
Yeah.
Since 1994, it's in Queenscliff.
Queenscliff.
So if you go, you've only got 2 songs left.
Well, I know. So power to deduction, it's going to be Mount Kimby Blue Train Lines.
Yeah, have you never been on the Blues Train?
No.
You've heard of the Blues Train?
My mother's going to kill me because we used to holiday as kids in Queenscliff, and I've probably been on it, but I'm struggling to get a memory.
When you say you've probably been on it, if you wouldn't go on it as a kid, probably.
Oh, isn't it? It's not a physical train.
It's a physical train. It goes between Queenscliff and 4 stops up the road at night time. So it's a booze laden.
Oh,
you'd love it.
I'd love it. Right.
It's got everything you want. So 4 carriages, 4 different bands. So every stop you change, get more booze out there.
Okay. Well, no, I'm going down there then. Though I don't know it, but there you go. You've introduced me to something new.
You'll say thank you, Rae Bonney, for that, because I no longer drink, as you know.
Yep.
But I went on that many, many years ago with my cousin Leander.
Yeah.
One of the best nights of my life.
Yeah.
Yep. Amazing. But that is the clue. So Blue Train Lines is the name of,
it's an interesting song. So Mount Kimby. So they're actually electronic music artists from the UK, and as being in community radio, I love my music and actually used to DJ back in the day a bit, and so I've got a lot of electronic music. This is not what you'd expect for an electronic music producer, and it's quite you talk about motivation. So music has the ability to drive and motivate you, and this is one of these songs that just builds and builds and builds. It's got some very tough lyrics in there. It's a bit of a trigger warning for some people.
Haven't I did listen to it, but I didn't sort of
out. So he deals with. He comes in as the protagonist and finds his girlfriend ODing on the bathroom floor, and then goes through this journey about losing her and trying to fight it and come back. And it deals with loss and all this and grief, and then fighting through it and coming back the other side. But it is one of those true songs that just. It can build, and you can see where it goes from a motivation point of view. So I do love it. Blue Train Lines.
There you go. Well, here it is. So have a listen, everyone. And when we come back, we'll have time just to pretty much wrap the show. So don't go away. You're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC. Oh, welcome back. That was
something different.
I think my heart rate's gone up to look, I'll have to check it on the Garmin. What is it? It's 71 beats a minute. That's pretty high for me. My resting's about 53. So there you go. Welcome back. The time is 44 minutes past 11 and you're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC with Rae Bonney, and sitting opposite me is Felix Blackler. Now, Felix, how would you describe yourself in an intro?
Jeez,
who are you?
I think you used the word circus before. That's probably a good,
a
good description. Look, I'll describe myself.
Who are you?
It's funny. Who am I? Look, I'm someone that lives life 150 miles an hour. I know that, and I think life is too short not to give things a go and do that. So who am I? I love doing things. That's probably the best way to say it. So, I love life. I love partying, going out with my friends, seeing people. I love my footy. Love spending time with my kids and Natalie, and I love work. So I think I'm constantly finding ways to, I guess, enjoy life. That's what I do. So I am 150 miles an hour. People often joke that sometimes I walk into a room and either start a sentence or finish it. You don't get the full sentence because I'm on to the next thing.
I know my producer, when they actually produce the show, is going to have a lot of trouble with the sound because you keep on going.
Because I keep moving around. Yeah, keep jumping up and down.
By the way, I am that person. Given the circus, one person producer.
Yeah, you are that person. So look, that's how I'd best describe myself. Somebody that and look, generally enjoys every aspect of what I do with my life, and I think come on a bit of a journey now. I'm turning 40 this year. Got 40 coming up in a few weeks almost now.
Well, given the trajectory that you've described today, I mean, you don't look it because you look like a boy, but. Wow, that's a lot. You've achieved a lot.
It's been a busy first 40 years. First 40 years, I guess more come. But yeah, so no, I'm generally really content in where things are.
You say you like everything. What don't you like?
God, what is it that I don't like? That's a really good question, Ray. I don't like being told no. I hate people giving me advice when I don't need it. Yep. I don't like being held back. That'd be a good way to summarize what I don't like. Yeah. Don't like too much structure or planning. Got to be able to have that spontaneity and flexibility in life. That's very clear in my profile, my Reiss profile. Yeah.
I don't like bad manners.
Don't like bad manners.
And how it impacts people. I think that if you visit my new website, created by the wonderful Danica.
Employee number one. Yep.
A bold statement on there is if you want to change or if you want to improve mental health in your workplace, just don't be an arsehole.
Yeah. It's good advice. It's
simple.
a great starting point. Yeah.
And I had an experience of an organisation recently where somebody had gone into the recruitment process with them. And they had received their resume and the organisation got back to say, we will see you for a 15-minute interview just to see if we like you or not. And I thought, wow, so you've put this big job out there and you're going to give somebody 15 minutes of your time. That already set the tone for me to say, we're not really valuing this. So this person went into the process and they had the 15 minutes. Person one in the interview said, I can't stay because I've got something else on, and left, and they were left with the other person. So there's the second sign to say, hey, we don't really care about you. So this person, unbeknown to them, really, really wanted this role, not only because it was a career thing for them, but also because they really needed a job during this current economic climate, really needed the position. So then after this interview, they said, we'll be back to you within a week. 2 weeks went by and crickets, nothing at all. So I took it upon myself. Being an advocate for mental health is to be politely pushing for people to understand how they impact others. So I wrote directly to the managing director saying, hey, here's an experience that has happened within your organisation. I just wanted to bring it to your attention because it's the small things that you do, like caring, that can really have an impact on others. So here's a really good tool. And I don't know if you've heard of this, Felix. It's called the Circle Back Initiative. I think they're a charity. Anyway, lots of organisations have signed up for this, like I think Australia Post have, Lynn Fox. But basically it's a commitment to get back to people who apply for jobs with your organisation, because we know the impact that it has on people's mental health. Anyway, this managing director got back to me and just said, "Oh, thanks for that."
Yeah. No, I mean, look, and organisations that take away or dehumanise processes or don't understand the gravity of the role that they play in people's lives will become less prominent, because we're seeing it now.
But people actually die. People literally...
They do. The stress becomes too much. But, the generations today of the workforce, and this is one of the biggest changes we're seeing, are people who want to feel connected from a sense of purpose, who want to feel a sense of an organisation that provides that safe environment and well-being. And if you have practices that don't support that, you just won't retain people. So, it's sad that it exists, Rae, but that's part of our job to help solve those problems.
I want to labour on this a little bit because I think you're glossing over it.
Yeah.
The gravity of it is that we don't know. You know my iceberg. You see the tip of the iceberg. You've got no idea what's going on for somebody. So that lack of recognition, the uncertainty it creates for the human condition, all of the non-validating piece can actually lead somebody who's really not managing well, can be the very last straw.
That could be it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I have seen it.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not writing to this managing director because I want to be a little upstart. It's because I actually really care about the well-being of people. And that's not about me helping. That's change. Being change is being changed.
Yeah.
Wanting change is something else. Oh, we need to change this. We need to get better at it. No, this does affect lives. So, on that point, if any of our discussions today have brought up uncomfortable feelings for listeners, please remember help is there. Here's a few options for further support. Lifeline, the number there is 131114. Phone that anytime, 24 hours. If you connect with somebody on the other end of the phone that doesn't resonate with you, just hang up and phone back as many times until you reach a person who you do. The suicide callback service, 1300 659 467, same deal there. And emergency services, 000. If you're worried about yourself or others, whether it's a physical thing or a mental thing, do not hesitate. That's why they're there for. They're amazing on the end of the phone. They're there for support. They'll triage in a really good way. So I'll be back on air next on Sunday the 15th of October, hopefully with Ben from Ben's Bees. He hasn't got back to my email yet, but that would be a really, really exciting show. And speaking of engaging programming here at 3WBC, coming up next, I believe, will be the divine Paula Hogg rolling out an entire lazy Sunday afternoon of music and banter, bound to get you relaxed. And I reckon, Felix, you'd like some of her tunes.
Yeah, well, I'll be paying attention and listening in.
Yeah, Paula, she comes on public transport.
Yeah, great.
With a bag full of CDs. She's very, very old school.
Yeah.
But amazing at what she does.
I love the fact that CDs are old school, though.
True.
Well, he could be lugging around a whole set of vinyl. So, beta tapes.
Well, we do. So we have... Oh, there was a turntable.
It's just behind you. I
Oh,
can
there
see
it
it
is.
there. There it is.
There we go. We can do that. And I know that there are some presenters here. In fact, 3WBC, amazing community of people and presenters from all walks of life, presenting an array of things that really, really resonate with our community here. And it's one of the reasons, I turn up for radio rather than podcasts. People say, why don't you just do a podcast? It's like, this with you is...
It's so much more dynamic. And that's it is one of the great things. But it's a great station.
Yes.
Having been in community radio myself, it brings back a lot of nostalgia.
Yeah.
But you're doing wonderful things, Rae. So no, thank you for the time for coming on. I've really appreciated it.
And it's live as well.
It is.
And we witnessed in the last song, your last song choice. Well, it's not the last one, but the intro I didn't realise was so long in silence, and so I'm thinking, we've got dead air, and that's a real no-no in radio.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, and I'm great in a crisis. I just don't panic. I just go, well, what can I do with this? So I just looked at you.
It's got a very, very quiet build-up. And I'm like, well, Ray's panicking. Well, she's not. Well, I couldn't see you were panicking. You're doing something over there. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking, what can I do? What can I do here? And then I thought, oh, Felix has worked in radio. He'll sort it out. But then we heard the
Then
sounds. It's like, that'll just make it easier for me to edit later, this big chunk of dead air to cut out. So Felix, what does it feel like being you today?
What doesn't feel like being me today?
What does it?
Or does it feel like being me? Oh, it's a positive affirmation, right? It does feel like being me today.
What does it feel? That's my question.
What does it feel like? Yeah. Look, it feels good. It feels good. I look back in the last. There's been a really nice kind of reflection. This does feel like this is your life. It really does. And there are things that you can look at being demotivators, or things that you've had to work through, and challenges. But you look back at those and go, but you've learned from those and made more positive steps. So, no, it feels good to be me today. I'm feeling good after seeing the Carlton Blues, get through to another final. I'm looking forward to a nice sunny, beautiful day out there, spending the afternoon with the family. So it feels good. It feels good, Rae.
Yeah, the sun on your pituitary gland, it's something, isn't it? You just take your face out into the sun and look up. In fact, that question, what does it feel like being you today, is my trademark question. And a few weeks ago, I was presenting at an organisation and had just launched my new website, which has a contact form that you can write in and ask questions or book in for one of the many services. Anyway, the night after, I got a note from somebody who was in the audience. It was like, oh, wow, this is really exciting. This works. Thanks, Danica. Really works. And this person, he said, I've never done any counselling before in my life, but there was some things that you said in your presentation that really resonated with me, and I think it's time. And I spoke with this guy the day after, and I said to him, what was the thing that resonated the most? And he said it was that question. What does it feel like being you today? He said, I realised that nobody's ever asked me what it feels like being me, ever.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah, and he said, I thought, beautiful. Well, you're the person that's, and so that's why. So, yeah, I was like going, oh, wow, that's so exciting, because you have no idea what that means to me.
Yeah, that's great. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it does work. So, as I said, thank you for coming on the show. It's such an honour to have you and hear a little bit more about your story, and I know that we will continue to work together. I love my community of people that I get to witness and see and draw experience from as as you help others. It's great that we can all do that together.
Yeah, no, thanks, Rae. Look forward to more. Maybe less McDonald's, more Atticas. If we just
Well, George's as I said, George's are off overseas to spread his wings and fly out into the culinary space in Europe. Yeah. So Attica,
incredible experience. You'll have the best time.
Yeah, he'll have a time.
He'll have a time. He'll have a time. It'll be an experience.
Time. Yeah.
No matter what happens. Yeah.
And I think, the unknown for human beings can be a very discombobulating space, but, George, like you, has a huge appetite for risk, and the loving support of his family as well. So there you go. Well, the last song needs no introduction.
Well, not really much of it doesn't need a clue.
There's no clue.
No. Well, this was you said to me 4 songs, and even if the family. So this is actually Poppy. This is my 4-year-old daughter, Poppy. I said to Poppy this morning, I'm going on radio. You can have whatever song you'd like to play, and I kind of knew which way to go. It'd be Taylor Swift 22. That's running on repeat in our house. Big Taylor Swift fan, Poppy. So this one's going out to Poppy Jalopy, sitting there ready to listening to Taylor Swift 22. Keep dancing. That's what my advice would be.
Here you go, Poppy. Well, thanks for tuning, everyone. Have a lovely Sunday, and do take care. See ya.
Thanks, Rae.